What's up, my family? Listen, first-time listener, or you've been here the whole damn time. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, giddy up, let's go, no notes.
That's my baby. That's my baby.
We're going at it at 110%.
I just want 5 minutes of happiness, please. Just give me 5 minutes.
And they scored! They did it!
Slap.
What the hell was that?
Oh, yeah!
What the f*** are you talking about?
Hey there, hi there, hello there. You're with us again for Bowen on the Birds. I know they're still letting me do this. I don't understand it either, but here we are. And it's actually game day, which hasn't happened before in doing this podcast on Thursdays. It just so happens that the Eagles are getting ready to kick off against the Minnesota Vikings in a few hours down in South Philadelphia at the Link. This is Week 2 of the NFL season. I don't think either team played particularly well in Week 1. The Eagles squeaked by the Patriots. The Vikings were upset at home by the Bucs. So we have, leading off our totally comprehensive coverage today, Kevin Seifert from ESPN, who covers the Vikings and is in town for this game and is ready to join us, I believe.
Yes. How are you, Les?
And I thank you again for doing this. It's very nice of you. I've always enjoyed reading your writing and watching you. And this is, a lot of mileage between the Eagles and the Vikings over the last decade or so. A lot of stuff has happened. Up and down. Both teams have been up and down. And I've seen, the Eagles win a Super Bowl at US Bank, and then I've seen them come back and get blown out by the Vikings at US Bank and all kind of stuff. So anyway, we're going to have a game tonight, and both teams have injury concerns. The one that's kind of fuzziest for me is Christian Darrisaw, the left tackle for the Vikings. What is the word? What do you think?
Well, he did some. They didn't really practice this week. They just did walkthroughs. He sprained his ankle and missed some time in their Week 1 game, but he did finish the game. And then they just did these walkthroughs during the course of the week, so they were not open to the media, so we couldn't really get our eyes on him. They listed him as questionable. I guess I would be surprised if he doesn't play, or at least doesn't give it a shot at playing. Which is obviously he's probably he definitely is their best offensive lineman. At a very critical position. And they already know they're not going to have their starting center, James Bradberry. So it would be really tough, extra tough to go on the field tonight in Philadelphia against that defensive line without two of your starting offensive linemen.
If Darrisaw can't play or if he doesn't get through the game, what will they do at left tackle? Who's next up?
Yeah, it would be this guy, Oli Udoh, who has been their swing tackle for a couple years. He's the one who came in during the when Darrisaw missed the couple plays in Week 1. He is like every NFL team. When you're putting your second left tackle in there, it's a big downgrade, and it's really nothing against him. But that would be
nobody has two really good ones. Yeah,
or even two guys that you would even really want to be out there for any amount of time. Yeah. And so that would be a trouble spot for them if that happens.
So the center is Austin Schlottman. Is that correct?
It will be Austin Schlottman. Yeah, I just very recently found out how to pronounce his name, so no worries there. He actually played. It's weird. James Bradberry was their first round pick 5 years ago, and he was a decent center for a while. And then last year, end of the year, he came down with a back problem and he missed a couple games. And he got in a car accident and missed the rest of the regular season. Played the playoff game. They re-signed him. And then I think 6 or 7 plays into the first regular season game, he comes up with another back injury. So that's very concerning on the Minnesota side for the long term of what that means for him. Yeah. But for tonight, it means that they'll have a guy who, fortunately or unfortunately, got a lot of experience at that position last year.
And I was going to say there were people who thought he played pretty well. That I know one guy who kind of thinks he's as good as Bradberry, but what do you think?
If that person thinks he's as good as Bradberry, that's probably a shot at Bradberry. But there are, like I said, there's some concerns that with his back, that Bradberry is maybe not the player, isn't going to be the player that they thought he would be. Schlotman is, in terms of having a guy that can play both guard positions and center, he's kind of the ideal swing backup offensive lineman, but he's been on the free agent market the past 2 years, and I don't think anyone has tried to sign him to be a starter. So you have to view the consensus of the league when you're evaluating that.
So the weird dynamic here, Kev, and I'm going to get into they have us come up with this agree or disagree question every week. And my agree or disagree this week is, the Eagles are missing 4 starters from last week, 3 on defense. And I think they're in big trouble tonight, frankly. You're free to agree or disagree there. But I want to, before you do, to me, there's sort of a disconnect here with Eagles fans. They acutely feel these absences because they've been talking about linebacker and safety, all off season. They're not happy with what the team has done at those positions. And now they're missing the best linebacker, Nakobe Dean, and the best safety, Reed Blankenship. And yet a lot of Eagles fans still think, no problem. And the reason they think this is because they have Kirk Cousins at night. And there's this sort of mystical thinking that when the sun, descends behind the stands at the Link this evening, Kirk Cousins will just disappear, because that's kind of what happened last year. But
yeah.
On the other hand, I've seen Kirk Cousins play very well against the Eagles for a couple different teams, and he did throw for like 4,500 yards last year and made the Pro Bowl. And the Eagles' pass defense over the middle, I think, is going to be a mess tonight. So how are you on my question there? Agree or disagree?
I don't know if they're in big trouble, but one thing it's just amazing to me and very instructive, especially when I had a different assignment at ESPN and I would go around the different teams. The view of any NFL team is so dramatically different inside that city compared to the outside. In Minnesota, everyone is looking at the Eagles as this completely indestructible force that is just going to crush the Vikings beyond belief. And who cares if this guy's hurt or James Bradberry has a concussion or this linebacker is on injury reserve? And the reason specifically they think that this week is that we just got done talking about the offensive line, and none of the injured players that you just mentioned are on the Eagles defensive line. And so that is anticipated to be a really tough matchup for the Vikings. And even if you don't have your top DBs in the game, even if you're missing a linebacker, if you're creating interior rush on Kirk Cousins, especially because he doesn't really leave the pocket, then you have a very good chance to disrupt that entire offense. And so that was sort of the theme of things from the other side in Minnesota this week. And even Justin Jefferson was saying, like, yeah, that's a really good front. This might not be the game to have, a bunch of long routes, slow developing plays. You might need a lot of quick passes, the quick game to really give you a chance. So I don't think, because of the way the matchup figures to be up front, I don't think the Eagles are in deep trouble. But if somehow the Vikings can get the ball out cleanly, Cousins can get it out cleanly over time,
right?
They do have a lot of skill players that I think will be mismatches with some of the people that the Eagles have left on the field.
And Justin Jefferson, the best offensive player in the NFC, had a bit of a down game against the Eagles last year. I thought that was Cousins' fault, frankly. I didn't really think it was so much Justin Jefferson's fault. But, I think fans are banking on that as well, that Darius Slay will just be able to follow him around and shut him down. And I doubt that's going to happen, frankly. And the thing with me about pass rush is I've seen the Eagles have emphasized this for years and years and years, all the time that they've had Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham and Chris Long and all these guys. And I've seen it in games where you can get there, but unless you get the quarterback down, if you're not covering on the back end, it doesn't take that long to get the ball out on a slant. It's really hard to get pressure on a quick pattern. And I don't know. We'll see. I was very confident about this game before I thought about the possibility of Blankenship not playing. I think he's a pretty important player. Bradberry certainly a very good player, Pro Bowl player. I do think Josh Jobe, the guy they have playing for him, is competent. He's not as good as Bradberry, but it's not like he's terrible. Yeah, I don't think. Maybe he is, but that we haven't seen that yet if he is. But yeah, I think Blankenship is a huge problem, and I think Nakobe Dean is a huge problem because the Eagles never pay linebackers year in and year out, decade in and decade out, and sometimes they sort of stumble into a good situation, as they did last year with T.J. Edwards and Kazir White, but they wouldn't pay either one of them when the end of the season came around. They both left.
Right.
And some years the Eagles end up with, scratching their heads like, gee, it would have been nice if we'd have done something there, wouldn't it? And I think this is one of those years, frankly. It's shaping up as one of those years. And we'll just have to see. Christian Ellis is going to be wearing the green dot tonight. He's an undrafted guy who has played very little in the defense. He was a good special teams find last year. And, does he know how to run the defense? I have no idea. So it'll be interesting to see. It really will. I wanted to ask you what the reaction was to that loss to Tampa Bay. It wasn't a horrible game, but it was an upset. It was at Minnesota. What did you think? What did you come out of it with?
Yeah, I mean, it was a discouraging game for the Vikings for a couple of reasons. One is, three really bad turnovers. One was a free blitzer where Cousins didn't seem to see him and just got pummeled and dropped the ball. Another, he threw an interception on the goal line, threw in a double coverage, and didn't take the under. The one time you want Kirk Cousins to take the check down, he didn't take the check down. And then on the third, it was just a bizarre thing in the red zone where he's trying to pitch the ball to the tailback and the right guard is pulling or like going to block down on the nose tackle, and his arm flails and hits the ball and knocks it out. And so that was another scoring drive that got lost. And so they lose by 3 points, commit 3 turnovers, don't get any turnovers. You walk off the field thinking, that we should have won that game. Had we just not screwed it up. And then you put it in the larger context of their opening schedule. So if you were analyzing their opening schedule, you say like week 1 at home against Tampa with Baker Mayfield. That's the game that you're kind of locked in on because you're going on a short week to play in Philadelphia. If you judge strength of schedule by quarterbacks, they're looking at Jalen Hurts, and then next week Justin Herbert, and then Patrick Mahomes in a couple weeks, and then a few weeks after that the 49ers. So in their first first 6 or 7 games, they have 3 extremely difficult opponents that, if you could split, you're doing great. And so you, in the calculus of getting to enough wins to get into the playoffs and not starting off so far behind the 8 ball in the beginning of the year, that was very much one that I think everyone internally and externally had checked as a must win, which is weird to say must win in week 1 of a 17-game season, but that was a game they needed. And plus it's an NFC game if they get into tiebreakers and all that at the end of the year. So a really a more consequential loss than you would sometimes have in week 1.
I see. Very well presented. I'm going to go to a commercial here, Kevin. We can have you for a few more minutes. When we come back, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
And we're back for the second segment of Bowen on the Birds with Kevin Seifert from ESPN, who is here in our fair city this afternoon for tonight's game, Eagles Vikings, Amazon Prime, which is always an interesting presentation of the game, I think. I'm not sure if I like it or not, but it is interesting. I wanted to ask you about, I saw you wrote today about Jefferson helping Byron Murphy, the corner that was acquired in the offseason. Tell our viewers about that.
Well, sort of the larger context is that Justin Jefferson came into training camp this summer, and he was very much knee-deep in negotiations for a potential contract extension. two of his teammates did sort of the new fangled thing of sort of holding in to get the new deals that they wanted. He kind of took the opposite approach. He came to camp and just went bonkers. He didn't take a single play off, let alone a practice. They didn't play him in the preseason games, but he was just smoking people left and right. But they had signed Byron Murphy from the Cardinals in free agency because, as we talked about, as you guys saw in week 2 last year, their pass defense was pretty atrocious. And so he was sort of the centerpiece of what they hoped would be some improvement. And so when you have a quote unquote number one receiver and number one cornerback, often they line up against each other. Yep. And Jefferson pretty quickly realized that Murphy's, pretty good. And he started telling Kirk Cousins about, hey, of all these new guys that we signed, like this guy is pretty good. And so there was sort of this like friendly battle going on throughout camp, where not only was Jefferson making Murphy better, because if you're guarding Justin Jefferson every day in training camp, it's not going to be any harder in any game that you play this year. It might be different, but it's not going to be any harder. And so but Jefferson was also getting something out of it. Murphy was giving him a really good look and helping him work on some things that he wanted to work on. The most important thing being patience at the top of his routes. Like the longer you can hold off committing to whether you're going left or right to make it too simple. But basically that's what it is, the better you are. And so he and Murphy both were kind of working on that. Murphy realizing that, you have to be patient as a cornerback and not commit too quickly either to what direction receiver's going. So long story short, it was just this really entertaining, 4 or 5 weeks. And, you have to find something that's fun to watch during training camp, because sometimes these practices can get boring, but they really went at it. And I think they both came out of it as, better players. And Murphy, last year especially when they had the nickel in, they were really porous. And so when they don't do it every time with Brian Flores, but sometimes when they go to nickel, he's actually the one that moves inside, even though he was quote unquote the number one corner. But the way the NFL has evolved, sometimes you need your best corner at nickel, and he can play that very well. And so it just kind of was a win-win situation for both of those guys, and something to watch and see a star player really, to whatever extent anybody would have the impression that a star player could take it easy during training camp. Justin Jefferson most definitely did not. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's good to know. And I wanted to ask you about Brian Flores. This is a very different defensive scheme than the Vikings had. How is it different? What does he do that's so different than Zimmer?
Well, it's actually kind of similar to some of the things Mike Zimmer did when he was the head coach. But when he was fired last year and Kevin O'Connell took over, they had Ed Donatel for a year, and Ed Donatel was very much a soft shell, stay back, 4-man rush, have some good, two good pass rushers to do that. And if you don't get home though, and your cover guys aren't very good, then you're really going to struggle. And that was the double whammy the Vikings had last year. So as NFL teams often do, when something isn't working, they went out and found somebody who was the complete opposite of the person that they fired. And Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores had a little bit of personal, they knew each other from when O'Connell was a player for the Patriots.
Yes.
And Flores was like a scouting intern or a coaching intern. It was really at the start of his career. And so they had met each other a long time ago. And Flores is very much the blitz, aggressive blitz, man-to-man pressure, have 8 guys in the line, blitz 5, drop 3. You never know which ones it's going to be. And so that was what we didn't see much of in the preseason, obviously, but that's what we were seeing during training camp practices. And then against Tampa, he blitzes 47% of the time, highest rate in the NFL in week 1. So almost every other play. And but then they also had some plays where they had 7 guys in the line and 4 of them dropped into coverage, and there was only 3 rushing. And that was where they got their 1 sack of Baker Mayfield when he couldn't find anywhere to throw. So there's ways to beat that, obviously, because you're not even with, whenever you blitz, you open up a zone somewhere else. And if you have a good veteran offensive line or a scheme that can adapt well, you can block a lot of those and your quarterback can get rid of the ball. And all of a sudden you have a lot of room to run. So it's not a foolproof way. Every fan, every media member wants, why don't you blitz more? Why don't you blitz more? There's definitely some downsides and some plays that can be made, big plays that can be made against the blitz. But I think Kevin O'Connell and the rest of the people at the Vikings thought, well, who knows what's going to happen defensively, but if we're going to go down, we're going to go down swinging this year. And so that's kind of the approach that they've taken. And I don't know that it was the number one, it certainly wasn't the number one reason why they lost. The turnovers were against Tampa. They did get a little worn down in the second half and give up some key third downs that allowed Tampa to keep the ball, and the Vikings couldn't get the ball back for one final drive. But, 20 points, less than 300 yards. It was not a bad performance last week.
No, it really wasn't. And it's interesting to me, whenever a team changes scheme like that, I always think about the personnel. You draft players, at least in some part, to fit what you're doing. And if you're doing something totally different, I was amazed when the Eagles hired Chip Kelly in 2013. Brandon Graham became a 3-4 linebacker, and Fletcher Cox became a 3-4 D end. And neither of them had come here to do that, but they actually kind of prospered in that. They figured it out very well. I guess a good player is a good player, in some respects anyway. But did they have to retool a lot to do this?
I mean, like last year they went to the 3-4, and that meant Daniil Hunter, who had been a great 4-3 defensive end, was playing outside linebacker and dropping into coverage more than you would like. And so that was definitely an example of overthinking, overdoing it, and not letting the guy play to his strengths. But the one thing, the Flores defense, it's almost like it's not position agnostic. It's not like it doesn't matter what position you are, but they'll have a safety line up as outside linebacker and put the outside linebacker over the nose and put the other safety at outside cornerback. And so what they've tried to do, if you were going to have a Brian Flores defense for a long time, you would draft players and sign players who could play multiple positions. But what they've tried to do is figure out who they have now that can play multiple positions and let them do that. And so over time, I'd imagine they'll acquire more people like that. Okay. But right now you see their quote unquote starting lineup last week against Tampa had 3 safeties. And one of them was playing the nickel on that particular play, but he also sometimes played outside, on the edge of the line, sometimes, anywhere. And so you'll have a hard if you're one of those guys who likes to track what alignment a team is in at play by play, offensively and defensively for this team, it's hard to do. Yeah,
I can understand that. I will let you go, but before I do you have a prediction for us tonight?
After we talked about all the matchup problems, and I know the Eagles have the injury problems, but it's difficult. I mean, hats off to the Vikings if they come in here and pull this one off. So I think the Eagles deserve to be the favorites. If I had to guess a score, I'd put it in the 24-17 range.
All right. Well, we'll see about that. And I hope you have a good trip down to the stadium, a good trip home, and a good season, Kevin. And I really appreciate you doing this.
Anytime, Les. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Okay.
That was Kevin Seifert from ESPN, who will cover tonight's game between the Vikings and the Eagles at the Link and on Amazon Prime. So I've got a few minutes here where all you're going to be able to listen to is me before Olivia Reiner comes on from the Inquirer. Olivia is part of the Inquirer's beat coverage. She moved over from the Flyers beat, which she had for a few years after coming to the Inquirer from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, where she covered the Packers. So Olivia and I have it in common that we both covered the Flyers before covering the Eagles. Although she had done football before in Milwaukee, I had not. So it was a bigger change for me, I think, than her. Olivia is a Germantown Academy grad from also Northwestern University. And I think she's done good work at the Inquirer. And I think she's a very good person to break down this matchup for us when she comes on in just a few minutes, we hope. So it's a short week for the Eagles. You always think of that as a negative because the bodies don't have time to recuperate from the pounding they take on Sunday, and that's absolutely true. It's not as true this early in the season, typically. You really feel it if you're doing it in like week 12, However, it did affect the Eagles this week in that they got some guys banged up in week 1. And who knows, if we had until Sunday, maybe Reed Blankenship can play, maybe James Bradberry clears the concussion protocol, but those things aren't happening between now and 8:25. So the Eagles are missing 4 starters. In order, I would think the least effect will be felt by the absence of Kenny Gainwell, the running back. Not because he isn't a good player. He certainly had a big share of the offense Sunday in New England, but they've got a big running back room. They kind of planned around the idea that somebody might get hurt. I don't know if they thought it might be Gainwell. I think they were kind of thinking Rashad Penny wasn't real dependable. But we'll see Rashad Penny tonight for the first time after he was a healthy scratch last week. I think Penny, is a very capable player. I think DeAndre Swift certainly is a very capable player, and I was disappointed with his role in the offense last Sunday, as a lot of people were. And there's always our good buddy Boston Scott, who's been around here forever, it seems like, and just steps in whenever he's needed. A guy that I think people underestimate what he brings to the team, frankly. He can really fill a lot of roles. He doesn't complain about, a game where he gets no touches or a game where he gets 15 touches, and he's capable of doing it either way. Well, I understand Olivia is ready to roll here, so let's bring her in so you can hear someone other than me ramble on and on. There she is. Olivia, how are you?
I'm doing well, Les. How are you?
Just great. Well, we've got a night game tonight. That's always fun for people who write for a living because there's ridiculous deadlines and stuff like that. But it's a Thursday game. As a writer, I always like Thursday games because then you have the weekend off. And really, the week leading into the Thursday game, you're not really straining for stuff to write because it's such a compressed time. You just barely got through dissecting the previous week's game, and now you've got another game coming. It's almost like hockey.
It is almost like hockey. I would be very familiar with that as well.
I told our viewers that you covered the Flyers for the Inquirer before coming over to this. The biggest difference, now I had not covered, when I came to the Eagles beat, I had not covered the NFL before. You had. But the biggest adjustment for me was this 1 game a week thing. The Flyers would play 3 times in 4 days. We didn't spend a lot of time going back over, something that happened Friday. And the that first half season, I was like, oh my God, we're still talking about this, Jesus, But that's kind of the way the NFL is, but not this week because the games are close together. So tell me about this, the injury situation. We have our agree to disagree question this week, which is basically with these 4 starters out, I kind of suddenly think the Eagles are in trouble. I think this is against an accomplished quarterback. The middle of the defense against the pass wasn't great in week 1, and it's sure not going to be any better without Nakobe Dean and Reed Blankenship. How much trouble are they in, Olivia?
It's a great question, and if I knew, I would, be making a lot of money, maybe working for the team and not working as a media person covering the team. But it is completely reasonable to have those concerns. I think we're at this point right now where it's so early in the season that it's a big question. What is it going to do when you take those players out of the equation, especially at positions where the team already is so thin, especially at safety and especially at inside linebacker? The Eagles have made a decision to not necessarily spend a lot of money at those positions. And whether you agree with it or disagree with it, you can't pay every position. I understand that. But this is one of those instances where it might come back to bite you. So that's the big question is, can the players that are going to fill in for a Nakobe Dean, a James Bradberry, Reed Blankenship, especially on the defense, I think is where the concerns are going to be mostly, because that is where the Eagles have the most absences among their week 1 starters. The Eagles have the luxury of being able to allow Rashad Penny to be active after he was inactive last week. So they have that there for Kenny Gainwell to at least, who knows exactly how the touches are going to be distributed among the running backs. I would assume that DeAndre Swift is going to be a bigger focus in the offense, but DeAndre Swift is also being utilized a lot as a receiver. So are we going to see him utilized more as a running back with Gainwell out of the lineup? Are we going to see more of Rashad Penny? I would think that we at least see some of him at some point during the game. Yes. But yes, the biggest questions and the biggest qualms, if I'm an Eagles fan, that I would have are the backups going to save the day for the Eagles defense? And a lot of those backups are unproven at this point. Especially, Christian Ellis hasn't necessarily taken a ton of defensive snaps at inside linebacker. We got to see him a little bit last week against the Patriots. He looked shaky at times, and he admitted as much. And then at safety too, we're likely going to see a lot of Justin Evans, Terrell Edmonds. I don't know. Who knows if we'll see some of rookie Sidney Brown back at safety? Yeah. It's a good question, and I would imagine the two veterans can't necessarily play the whole game. So I would also think we'll see some of Sidney Brown, but how heavily are the Eagles going to rely on him to take defensive snaps? He didn't have any defensive snaps last week against the Patriots. Right. So I'm somewhere in the middle right now. We'll see what happens when you take those guys. I know that's not a hot take, but
that's all right. We're not a hot take kind of show, but we are going to have to go to commercial here for just a second. If I don't knock my laptop off the table first, very professional hosting going on here. Let's go to commercial, and we'll be back with Olivia Reiner right after this.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
And we're back with another segment of Bowen on the Birds with Olivia Reiner from the Philadelphia Inquirer. We were talking about tonight's matchup and the people that are missing, and what you said about the defense is really interesting to me. In baseball, they say the ball always finds the worst fielder. So the injuries in this case found the two weakest positions, safety and linebacker, also corner, which is not a weak position, but the best safety and the best linebacker in groups that most fans think are staffed anyway. That seems like a problem to me, and it is going to be interesting to see who shows up. I mean, Christian Ellis, he's got the green dot. He's played very few defensive snaps in his NFL career thus far. I'd almost try something like Avonte Maddox at safety, and fill the slot with Goodrich or something like that, just to get some experience back there. Somebody who's seen stuff before, But I guess the hope is that the defensive line will just sack and pillage the Vikings, and they won't have to worry about the coverage too much. Is that what you think? They're hoping for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's ultimately what happened last week against the Patriots. Is that this game, it really came down to the trenches, especially for the Eagles on defense, and we got to see Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis have their first sacks of their careers, and they really took advantage of weaknesses along the Patriots' offensive line. We're going to see a very likely similar situation tonight with the Vikings having some attrition on their offensive line as well. So we already know there could be as many as two starters out along the offensive line. We already know that Garrett Bradberry, the center, is going to be out. It's possible. I know left tackle Christian Darrisaw is dealing with an ankle injury, so there's a possibility that he won't play tonight. He's listed as questionable right now. It's a huge opportunity there for Carter, for Davis, for Fletcher Cox, for Milton Williams. Both those guys also had strong games getting after Mac Jones last week. So that's going to be a huge factor. And if Kirk Cousins can't get the ball out quickly, then I think that, the Eagles defensive front could be feasting today.
So the Eagles' offensive line is healthy for this game, as far as I know. I was a little bit underwhelmed Sunday. I know they were playing a good defense, maybe one of the very best defenses in the NFL. We'll have to see how that goes. Certainly, like Matthew Judon is a heck of a player. But I wasn't impressed. There was a lot of handing stuff off, didn't go smoothly, and the run game was really crap. And, you know, there are a lot of pressures. Gave it, 15 pressures, something like that. What do you make of that? And will that go away this week, you think?
It's a good question. You know, talking to some of the offensive linemen in the locker room over the last couple of days, I spoke to Jordan Mailata the other day, and yeah, he was not pleased with how the offensive line performed against the Patriots. He said a lot of it came down to just poor communication among the group. This is a group, a veteran-ish group that has, you know, at least some of the members have been together for quite some time now. You know, there's the only new face on the offensive line this year is that right guard with Cam Jurgens. So I guess to some extent they're still shaking off the week one rust, and they need to work out those communication issues, get better. And it's tough to make those adjustments on a short week. It's it is what it is, though. That's what happens. Everyone's got to go through it. Every team has to go through it at some point during the season. So as long as they can address those issues, we know this Eagles offensive line is a very good offensive line. It was their strongest, arguably their strongest position group going into the Super Bowl last year. And there were plenty of strong position groups on both sides last year in the Super Bowl. So yeah, the offensive line, not my biggest concern today by any stretch of the imagination. However, yeah, last week I would agree with you. The Patriots defense, give them a lot of credit. That's a great defense. They are consistently good under Bill Belichick. So, but that said, the Eagles offensive line, they need to be able to turn around quickly, make those adjustments, and get set for tonight.
Yes, they really do. And it's I think a lot hinges on the offense tonight, because I really don't think the defense is in a great spot. I think the offense kind of has to take this game, get a lead, you know, establish control of this very, very early. And the point you made, it was a very good one about not being able to sort of fix everything in a couple of days, especially when you don't really practice for a Thursday game. Having a Thursday game this early is good body-wise, I guess, because it's, as I've said earlier in the show, it's not week 12 when everybody's, you know, dragging. But in terms of trying to fix stuff from week one, it's got to be chaos. I mean, I can't imagine a lot of those position coaches have gotten any sleep at all. I think, and you can't hit everybody with 20 different things they need to correct either. You kind of need to hone in on a couple. That's one thing. I wanted to get your opinion on this too. I always felt sometimes there was a clarity that a Thursday night game would bring. You didn't see, offenses don't tend to overthink Thursday. You go back to what you're good at, your staples, you know, and you just do that rather than, well, they'll be expecting this, so we'll take the tight end and have him circle around the backfield twice. And, you know, you don't get that kind of thing, that overthinking in a Thursday game. And I think that, you know, it can help you as a play caller, I guess. And I saw a need for that, frankly, a little bit Sunday.
Yeah, you got to keep it simple this week. I think the Eagles offense obviously had a lot of success last year. They're returning so many of their starters on offense. Yeah. So do what works. Do what worked for you last season, and adjust where you have to in game as if the Vikings start to catch on to what you're doing. But Jalen Hurts is a smart player. He's a capable player. He didn't have his best game by any means against the Patriots. They're going to need to get him back to feeling comfortable and doing what he's good at doing. The Eagles had a lot of success last season running the RPO game and allowing Hurts to make those quick decisions and assessing the defense. So try to get back to doing what they do best. It was, you know, they managed to pull through largely because of the defense. And really, at the end of the day, Jake Elliott, 4 for 4 on his field goals. Sometimes you need your special teams to step up, and that's what he did. But this is now the Eagles offense needs to pay it forward a little bit. They got bailed out by their defense last week. They got bailed out by their special teams last week. It's time for them to step up today.
Yeah, the Jalen Hurts performance was probably the biggest surprise for me from week one. And I in the wake of it, I sort of wondered if we've put too much on him, that he's not allowed to be human anymore. He's so responsible and so mature and so, he works so hard to get better. But he's not always going to be, Superman. And, we saw that last week. It looked a little bit like some of those games after he hurt his shoulder last year, where he seemed a little tentative and a little off. And I don't know. You kind of have to. I don't want him running around 15 carries a game and getting hurt. But at the same time, there are a couple times when he just went down at the line of scrimmage rather than take a hit. And it might have been smart, but is that his game? Is that the guy that we've come to know? I don't know. I think he needs to be comfortable. He needs to find the Jalen Hurts game rather than what he thinks he should be doing now that he's making all this money, I guess. You have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's tough to look at last week as and draw a ton of really big conclusions from, is this going to be the Jalen Hurts that
works? But that's what we do.
I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but by any means. But I also it's tough to look at last week and be like, this is what it's going to be for the rest of the season. This is how he's going to be for the rest of the season. Things changed, and we have seen better from him than what we saw in one game last week. So for that reason, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. However, you want to. He got paid all the money that he's getting paid. And signed that really incredible extension in the offseason for what he's done and for what he's capable of doing. He calls himself a triple threat with his abilities in the passing game and the running game, his ability to use his intelligence on the field. And you want him to be able to feel comfortable and thrive in all three of those areas. You don't want to try to mold him and push him in one direction or anything. He is what he is, and that's why he got paid. So I think we're all eager to see that game. I don't necessarily think we saw absolutely everything that he can be on the field against the Patriots on Sunday. So tonight's, and there's no weather issues. Not that anyone's putting blame necessarily on the rain, but certainly
early in the game, I think it set the tone a little bit. It kind of kept things under wraps a little. Early on.
And they seem more willing to hand the ball off to their backs early on. So I think the rain did dictate things a little bit early on, but you can't blame the rain today. You're back home opener in front of your home crowd. I think there's a lot of reason that this team could get up for this game. So we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. And one guy, we were talking about injuries. I forgot to mention that Fletcher Cox listed as questionable. Is that a questionable, or is that he's questionable, but he'll play kind of questionable?
It's a good question. I believe our my colleague Jeff McLean had reported earlier that this when the injury initially happened, that it was going to depend on pain management and what Fletcher Cox would be able to do to mitigate the pain of the ribs injury. We'll see what happens. He was in the locker room for 5 seconds the other day, and I went up to him hey, got a second to talk? He's like, I gotta go get treatment or whatever, and then he came back with 5 seconds remaining in open locker room. So I didn't get to.
A savvy veteern there.
He's smart, and he wasn't the only one. So listen, it is what it is, and that's what happens. But we'll find out soon enough if he is in fact good to go.
All righty. Well, we have one more commercial, and then we'll ask you a few more things, and then we'll let you go to the game and stuff. You have to do your actual job. So we'll be back on the other side here with Olivia Reiner.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, proudly celebrating 40 years and our new, bigger showroom.
Twice the size and twice the fun.
More pool tables by Olhausen. More dartboard sets, including custom reclaimed backboards. More bar and kitchen stools that can change a room.
And more bars, including pre-built and custom.
Hot tubs, skee ball, shuffleboard, outdoor,
and fun.
Royal Billiard and Recreation, your ultimate game room store. Now located on Bethlehem Pike in Colmar.
And we're back for the final segment of today's Bowen on the Birds, a pre-game Bowen on the Birds, a very rare and precious opportunity for us. Basically, it means nobody's going to be watching this tomorrow or the next day, I think, is really what it comes down to. But we're going to do the best we can here. Let's hope everybody is out in the parking lot, glued to their phones, watching this right now. So anyway, Olivia, I wanted to ask you, Dallas Goedert, you wrote about him this week, and I was struck by how well he handled what happened Sunday. A guy of his stature, he's always fighting to be recognized as one of those top 2, 3, 4 tight ends in the league. If you don't ever throw him the ball, that's probably not going to happen. A lot of guys would have been peeved over that, and he handled it very gracefully, I thought.
I thought so too. It's at the end of the day, this is a team sport. He wants his biggest goal is to win a Super Bowl, and the Eagles came out with a win. So you're stacking games, and if that's the most important thing to happen is to come out with a win, then there you go, you got that. So, but that said, of course, Dallas Goedert naturally is going to want the ball more, and the Eagles, and he knows this too. The Eagles want to get him the ball too. He shouldn't come out of the game without at least a reception, if not more. Certainly, one target is not enough. If the Eagles want to win, it obviously makes the most sense to get your ball in the hands of your playmakers, and Dallas Goedert is one of them. So I wouldn't be shocked today if we saw Nick Sirianni early on, or I guess I should say Brian Johnson early on, just trying to get the ball in Goddard's hand and get him into a rhythm. And I think that's kind of what we saw, and as I wrote with Devontae Smith last year in week 2. And then in week 3 against the Washington Commanders, exploding for over 150 yards and a touchdown. So it doesn't, and Smith didn't have a reception week 1 either last year. So it's not to say that Dallas Goedert will go without a reception for the rest of the season. But that really, it shouldn't happen. And DeAndre Swift shouldn't have 2 carries, 2 touches, whatever it ended up being. So the Eagles have to be conscious of getting the ball in the hands of their playmakers today.
Yeah, and I know it was a strange game. I know they played a specialized defense, but I have to think that first time as offensive coordinator for Brian Johnson, some things kind of got short shrifted that, they didn't really own up to that after the game, but I kind of think they forgot people as the game went along. And I think they probably need to settle into a groove on that. I wanted to ask you, Justin Jefferson. So you think they have Slay travel around with him this week? Is that you have to do that, or do you not have to do that?
It's tough because, obviously last year it worked out really well for them. Darius Slay, Jefferson.
But it worked out well for them because Kirk Cousins was really awful last year in this game. I'm not sure that Slay actually took Justin Jefferson out of the field of play. But Slay is very confident against him, I think.
Sure, and he should feel very confident after last year's performance. You're going to pick off Cousins twice. You're going to limit Justin Jefferson to 3 receptions for 14 yards. Darius Slay deserves to feel confident going up against Justin Jefferson. That said, Jefferson's probably out for some revenge today. And whether or not the Eagles decide to trail Slay with him, it's a good question, but you also have to look on the other side. I mean, they're going to be starting most likely Josh Jobe in James Bradberry's place. Bradberry's still dealing with a concussion. Not really still. It happened on Sunday. So the likelihood that he would be able to clear concussion protocol is, non-existent, I would say. But that said, now,
that would be
sure
irresponsible of them to put him out there on a Thursday.
Absolutely. Take your time. Not worth it.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't get the feeling that this was one of those concussions where the guy says he's fine 5 minutes later, but the test didn't come out right or so. This was like a real, like he's laboring with this, I would think. It seems like it was a big hit.
Yes, no, and it was good for him to get him right off the field and call it there. It was a scary helmet to helmet collision for him. But yeah, so you're relying now on Josh Jobe, who hasn't started an NFL game. This is a guy that the Eagles have a lot of confidence in. Undrafted free agent last season, made the initial 53 last year, made the initial 53 this year, and he's here for a reason. We have just yet to see exactly, not necessarily what that reason is, but if he can stack up in an actual NFL game. So he's going to get that opportunity to show what he's got tonight, lining up most likely perhaps against Jordan Addison, who had a really strong game for the Vikings last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, got his first touchdown. I think he had over 60 receiving yards himself. So that you add TJ Hawkinson into the mix there. I mean, this is a really dangerous passing attack that the Vikings have, and the Eagles are going to be tested. I would think that Darius Slay is going to trail Justin Jefferson at least a decent portion of tonight, but probably not every single snap. So that means that
I don't think he did every single snap last year. In fact, no. I think Avonte Maddox had him for part of the time last year. I think they actually put Jefferson in the slot so that he'd be matched up against Maddox. Speaking of matchups, I guess Josh Jobe, we were talking about Josh Jobe. Let's not get off of that too quickly. I remember when he was drafted. I remember he was at one point in his college career real highly thought of prospect, as a lot of guys at Alabama tend to be. But he played his senior year with turf toe, and he had a miserable year. And all of a sudden, it was like, nobody wants. No, it was just an injury. I mean, it's not like they cut his toe off or anything. I was kind of puzzled that he didn't get drafted. But he's only played, maybe 20 defensive snaps in the NFL. And this is a big spot for him. I like him as a player, but it's not much experience there. No, it's not at all. And so they're putting they have a lot of confidence in him. At least they've expressed as much during the week. Nick Sirianni saying that they're confident in him to step up, but they really have no choice but to be confident right now in him because there's not really another better option. He's the guy. So I'm excited to see him tonight. He only played 8 defensive snaps last week against the Patriots because James Bradberry injured pretty late in the game, and so Jobe came in for him, and he looked pretty good in those 8 snaps. He even had a pass breakup. It's not like Mac Jones wasn't trying to throw that way, maybe pick on him a little bit, but he stood up to it. Now we're going to see him in a much larger sample, though. Can he hold up through an entire game? That is what we will find out tonight. Right. And you mentioned TJ Hawkinson, and that's something I would be very concerned about. The middle of the field, the tight end. I don't think they did a great job on the tight ends last week, and this is a real good one. You don't hear this guy talked about with the Kittles and the Kelseys and the Goddards and so forth, but he's a really good tight end. He can hurt you. And what do they do? Who handles him, you think?
It's a good question. I mean, last week, that was where the Eagles really got picked on was in the middle of the field. And Mac Jones had a lot of success. I'll reference Jeff McLean again. He wrote about the struggles of the inside linebackers in general last week and how successful Mac Jones was in targeting the middle of the field, completing 28 passes. So 79% of his passes in the middle of the field for 256 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's not ideal for the Eagles defense. Certainly that's something that they're circling, and hopefully for them, I'm sure that they hope that they can adjust some of that going into today's game. But I mean, if I am the Vikings, that's certainly an area I'm looking to exploit. But it's a good question how they're going to try to at least address Hawkinson. But you've got 2 other receivers that are going to draw plenty of attention from the secondary as well. So you're really going to be relying on your linebackers, your off-ball linebackers and your safeties to try to contain the middle of the field, to try to contain Hawkinson. And if they don't try to at least, if those guys don't rise to the occasion, and they're already going to be trying to fill in some relatively big shoes, as we mentioned earlier, with Blankenship being out, with Nakobe Dean being out. And so it's a tough test. This is going to be a really tough test for them tonight.
Yeah, if Sean Desai can pull this off, if they look really good tonight, then I will sort of, all of my doubts or need to see things about him will be immediately written off, because this is a very, as we've said, a very difficult situation in terms of the time, in terms of the specific people who are injured. If he can get out of this unscathed, I think he's probably going to be a pretty good defensive coordinator.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, we've talked to, since the very beginning of training camp, talking to Jalen Hurts about, what is the identity of this team? And it's too early to say what the identity of this team is. But a game like this is the kind of game that a team can use to really build up their identity, build their confidence, especially on the defensive side of the ball, where they are so depleted. If some of those backups can step up and try to contain this Vikings offense, especially their passing game, then I'd be feeling pretty good about myself if I were them.
Yes, absolutely. And then you get the weekend off, and that's always precious for a beat writer. That's and for the players, of course. But I always thought that was such a treat. It just never happens, during the season. So I know you're looking forward to that, and I hope they get through it without any of these big injury things that, that can keep you working all through the weekend. If somebody's going to see Dr. such and such and so, and that you don't need any of that. So let's hope we aren't going to go in that direction. But it ought to be a great game. I'm looking forward to reading what you write about it. And, I really appreciate you coming on here with me today. Tell everybody, do you have anything coming up feature-wise or anything like that you need to tell anybody about? Or you guys have a show, I guess, that you do. You can talk about that.
Yeah. We do a live pregame show, and I will not be looking like this. Hopefully I'll be looking a little bit more professional by the time I arrive to the press box tonight. Thank you. I won't be wearing a sweatshirt. But yes, we'll be live today on Inquirer.com/Eagles game day, I believe, and we'll be over there. We'll also be streaming live on YouTube as well, on the Philadelphia Inquirer's YouTube page, Game Day Central. We'll be breaking down everything you need to know going into tonight's matchup. That will be at 6:45 p.m. So I'll be in the press box. We can chat. You can send us some questions. It'll be a lot of fun. So that will be tonight. Of course, check out all of our Eagles coverage over at Inquirer.com. Wherever, you can buy your newspaper too. Feel free to support us there.
Absolutely.
As well.
Always a good thing to do. Yes. I like to tune into that game day thing just because I like to admire Josh Tolentino's hair. I don't have that myself. So
he's got good hair. It's always perfect.
It is. I've never seen it out of place. It's
no, neither have I.
Superhero type hair. Yeah, it's very amazing. But I do thank you again. I'll let you get ready for your big game tonight, and I hope everything goes smoothly. Quick game. Of course, Les. Both teams run the ball. Quick game, no overtime.
I appreciate
that we can write.
Never
all
overtime.
Those things I hope for you. Here.
Thanks, Les.
So that wraps it up for another edition of Bowen on the Birds. We'll be back next week, and I don't know who my guest will be yet, but I'm pretty sure I'll be here, and I hope you will be too. Thanks, Mike.